like, what is it? There was some weird statistic that the Bureau of Labor put out saying something that like 70% of Americans live like paycheck to paycheck or something.
You're
exactly. That's the important thing. They already live paycheck to paycheck. So what are they going to save their money for? Food, survival, rents be paid.
Raju, can I ask you, like, did you are you pretty much doing video through your computer and joined in another device for audio?
Yeah, hang on, I'm flipping it.
I was gonna say, yeah.
He's got two Rajus so on my screen. But I mean, those are a good point. I don't mean this as a negative or a positive, because reality is reality. Most people already were living paycheck to paycheck. Now this happens. They're gonna prioritize diapers, toilet paper.
So I jumped in the middle of this. What do we like? So what's the topic at hand?
Southern India, since you're on.
Sure.
Everything has to do with you now, because you're from a country that obviously has more people.
Yeah, and we also have a lot of poverty, and we can talk about how we ended up in that sort of situation. But so like there have been reports saying that there's problems with people in slums, and how are they going to sort of self-isolate when you can't
negative or positive?
Right? What was it at one point? Delhi had a population density of 10,000 people per square kilometer, which is an absurd amount of people to think about.
What?
But yeah,
it's true.
It's a lot of people.
Bangladesh beat them by 1% or something.
But it's like, this is what happens when you sort of end up through historic and cultural means of messing up economies, messing up the way that systems work, and then it's like the Fertile Crescent has always been fertile. That's kind of the thing there, right? India is an area in which you can support a lot more people than you could even you can conceive of doing in, say, somewhere like Norway. And as a result, India and China have always been population dense regions ever since. Since we could get there.
Even before Jesus Christ.
Well, yeah, before Jesus Christ, there was a lot of time before Jesus Christ, right? It's kind of it's funny, yeah. So it's sort of like India and China have always been population dense. It's not like it's a new problem because of X or Y thing. It's India and China have always been population dense because those regions could always support more people. Right. You're not going to get 1 billion people living in Alaska. Well, you're not going to get 1 billion people living in Alaska because you can't feed them. But in India you could. In China you can. So that's the problem. But the one interesting thing about those areas is that for how dense their population is percentage wise, you're not seeing an equivalent amount of cases of coronavirus or coronavirus transmission, and you have to ask yourself, why is that, right? Like, if everything's scaled by population, then the United States shouldn't be where the United States is. And then you have to ask yourself, why are we in a situation where the United States is seeing such high instances of coronavirus cases? And, I've got family out in Florida. I've got family all up and down the East Coast. And I hear from every single one of them saying, oh, I can see the beach from my house and somebody's throwing a barbecue for 50 of their friends right now. They're all hanging out, sweating on each other and shit. And it's because people don't necessarily think about the fact that sometimes the needs of the greater good are more important than the needs of the individual. And that's a fundamentally non-Western ideal, right? To think about the many over the self is a difficult concept for Western cultures, primarily Americans, because we're all about individualism, which is fine. It's not a bad thing, but it is a bad thing when it results in a situation in which people could die.
Yeah,
it's kind of sad.
So we could see a lot more visas from India coming to this country after this pandemic. Then we need to fill the slots, right?
Sure, but we don't. So the interesting thing about immigrants.
That's kind of a joke, kind of.
Yeah, it is, but at the same time, it's sort of like, if the situation gets to a point where we do have a population crisis, then you are going to see an influx of immigrants, right? Like the reason that the United States does see an influx of immigrants is because the economic draw versus the number of people willing to take those opportunities has shifted one way or another, and I mean, it's really funny to think about it this way, but like the majority of people, like a lot of the immigrants that come to this country, especially through the H-1B visa system, are all highly educated people. Like
Yeah.
people are always like, "Oh, lotteries, like we're getting the worst of the worst." No, you're actually getting the
Oh
best
no,
of the
I
best.
mean, other than like Native Americans, I mean, all of us are immigrants, so there's really no. In my world, there's no politics there. We're all immigrants. I mean,
No, that's very true, right? And even the Native Americans were technically immigrants, right? They sort of migrated out of
whatever it happened to the bridge.
Yeah. So it's just really funny to me
So
because it's like
in your friendship, you're not seeing the same effect of the COVID virus as we could be seeing. India did a good job.
India. Okay, so it's complicated, right? It's sort of like we have to, with every country, we have to look at what's being reported versus what's actually true on the ground. But based on what I know from my family that's there, like they're not as concerned because like my grandparents, my grandmother is a very stubborn individual. I love her to death, but like, she doesn't take most things seriously because she thinks she's tougher than that. But like when this whole thing started going down, she immediately like locked down because their messaging was, hey, people are getting sick. Stay home. And so they were like, okay, stay home. So they stay home. Yeah. Now, like the big problems are going to be in areas like slums and stuff where people where people have nowhere else to go, right? Like the large population centers are. But if you think about it, it's like some of the cities in India have net populations greater than that of the United States at times, right? It's kind of like all
that
those
is
people
so
in one area.
Not really even fathomable. Like I mean, I cannot really understand that. Like, it is hard to imagine, but absolutely. Like I mean,
right. So it's sort of like what do you do with all those people? And the reason that those people are in those sorts of situations is because of a long history. Like just everything is action consequence down, right? But at the same time, it's like they're making efforts, but the efforts that they can make, or the only choices that they can make, some of them are like they have to escape the slums and they're going back to their villages, and this is kind of a problem, right? You're getting like essentially migration of people out of centers back to their villages where they can infect more people. Now the question becomes, do they get there and sort of end up in a self-isolating sort of situation and therefore can keep the disease at bay? We don't know. It's going to be interesting to see how this whole thing pans out. But the part that like really kind of confuses me the most is, we always talk about how like, the West is sort of an example for X or Y thing. And when you take Germany, for instance, you know what? Great example, Germany. You're doing a good job. Fantastic, right? South Korea did a great job until that one guy decided to be a jerk about it and go infect a bunch of people, right? But
I didn't hear about that. Wow.
Oh, it was sort of like patient 31 in South Korea was the person who decided not to self-isolate, and as a result of patient 31, they had like an explosion of like infection because he was out getting people, like infecting people. But up to patient 30, they only had 30 people. It was 31 decided to not follow protocol, right? But like here in this country, I'm like, I don't understand. Like I was skeptical in the beginning at the rate at which this moves, and I'm a well-educated, this is my field adjacent, right? I understand all this stuff, but at the same time, I was like, I'd rather, as I was telling the lady at the grocery store, like yesterday, it's like, I'd rather be safe than dead. That's just kind of it. Like I draw the line at death. You can't come back from death.
Yeah, that's a good way of looking at it, but it's definitely a weird thing. Like I don't think that there's a. I mean, and I think I told you this, right? But like, I feel like I've talked to some people that know. I don't know Jack, right? But like some people that are definitely more educated than me on it. I've seen like a bunch of podcasts on it. Really, the consensus, like what I'm able to get from this, is that this is a weird virus. Like, I mean, there's a lot of stuff that keeps coming up as new data as we keep transitioning.
It's unprecedented. I think
it is unprecedented. Absolutely,
right? It's.
Yeah, that's the word I was looking for. Yeah.
Yeah. So it's it's an interesting situation, and we'll just have to take it one day at a time and hope that more people fall into the camp of the greater good is the good of the many is more important than the good of the me, right? But convincing people to do that is always difficult. It's sort of like, I don't know. It's just I think we're culturally sort of engineered against it a little bit, but at the same time, because it's like, I've had situations in the past where it's sort of like, I make a choice that is the good of the many over the good of the me, and people are like, "Oh, I would never do that." I'm like, "See, but you should though. Like sometimes it's important to make that choice." I'm not saying cut your arm off and like do something ridiculous, but when it's something as simple as stay at home, don't throw a party, you celebrate your birthday like when you can celebrate your birthday later. You don't have to do it right now. You're still gonna get a day older the next day. Like it doesn't matter.
The leadership and the positivity or the message, why did the message fail so miserably? It wasn't a law, it wasn't an executive order for any governor at first. But why does the message have to be so like, oh, I'm not taking that, like screw that out? I don't know how long it takes to create a culture that like believes in the leader that's the mayor or the governor, whoever. But how come the message doesn't stick? How come nobody gives a shit about the message anymore? You know what I mean?
Yeah.
On this similar case, though, right now, the message was from everyone. Most people know, most people don't vote, right? So the leaders had a bad message, but we don't have a medical system that's actually a medical system. And people don't believe it automatically because they've been fighting these systems for years. In America, by the way, other countries just don't have systems. So they've been fighting them internally anyway. So once this has occurred, they don't already believe anything. They don't trust politicians. There actually is no system of intelligence, by the way. And so they degrade. They don't even degrade. They stay on the same line.
And the world evolves away from them, right? It's kind of a... I think it's also a little bit of like people have been consistently sort of let down, right? It's kind of it's the old adage I like to use is if you kick a dog enough times, it won't like trust you anymore.
Right.
And people are a little less trusting than dogs to begin with. But
it's like
go ahead.
Like even at work, like when we're trying to explain something to somebody, and you could tell like there's like this. We can read our audience and we say, "Oh, he's not getting it," or "She's not getting it." What I'm trying to tell her, and we readjust the way we speak and communicate to make sure that person gets it. I feel like we've lost that completely when it comes to messaging. When it comes to maybe the MAGA crowd has it because when Trump does talk, people do listen. Like when they follow him.
Well, but that's kind of that's a false argument in the sense that he's not necessarily saying something that they don't already believe, right? Getting people to believe something that is slightly different from what they already believe is more difficult than just sort of mouthboxing what they already hear, right? It's like I can sit here all day and tell myself I'm the greatest, and then have you tell me I'm the greatest, and I'm going to want to believe that, right? Because I am the greatest. But
you are the greatest, but I think that it's time to change this paradigm that you are the greatest and you are the greatest and he's the greatest.
Yeah.
But we have scientific knowledge to start to pass on for a generation to the generation to the generation. And it's not me speak, it's we speak.
Yeah. Well, so here's something interesting that like, my wife and I have been discussing since we met, really. And I'm under the fundamental belief that, like, the reason that we are in the state we're in is because people don't think critically and aren't able to process facts. And I chalk that up to the fact that the public schooling system in this country was allowed to sort of be dismantled and gutted. Well, dismantled and gutted mean the same thing, right? Dismantled and no longer supported, which has led to a lot of people who can't sort of listen and process information. And therefore, when anyone tells them anything, they take that as fact.
Wait. What do you mean? Like by the public system being gutted? Like.
So the country, right? The United States was able to sort of maintain its sort of like power post-World War II because they had a strong public schooling system in which everybody had a basic standard of education, and that basic standard of education required them to be able to think and function within society, right? And from at least when I started going to school, we had a couple programs put in place that sort of made it so that you were essentially a checkbox item. You just sort of had to checkbox your way through life rather than actually critically think for yourself. I, unfortunately or fortunately, lived in a household and also had some fantastic public school teachers who forced me to think and sort of fight for every belief that I've had. Therefore, it's like, I bring in information. I'm naturally just a skeptic, and I sort of think through everything. The majority of Americans nowadays don't really do that, right? If Hillary Clinton says X, therefore it must be true, because how can I know better, right? I'm not even going to question that. Or if Trump says Y, I'm not going to question that. And it's because they've sort of been put into a system where they fundamentally cannot question, or do not know that they can even question. Because it's not that facts are facts, it's so much that the person above me saying something is probably more right than I am, because how can I know any better, right? Nobody thinks for themselves anymore.
Yeah, people don't think critically.
I want to interject a little bit here because I'm the old guy. I mean, because it's people like you, and I'm so proud to have all you young thinkers. Remember, most of the population has never thought about stuff. They've never thought too hard past the next peanut butter and jelly sandwich. So when we say America above these things and these statistics, remember, our largest populations exist in Asia. So we need to interject them to think like halfway to America. I mean, just Americans, us, you guys, because you guys in Mexico City, obviously you went above the bounds. It's not just America that should decide for the world. It's all people who need to reach that education level to decide for the world. It's not just Americans that can do it, because amongst the population, remember, Americans are just babies from other countries.
Right. So I totally agree with you. And it's like,
to take the front load now. You guys are the future leaders, like it or not.
Yeah. But I think that, we all just need to sort of, and it comes down to sort of being willing to sort of sit down with people who don't necessarily share the same view, and being able to sort of have that discussion. And it's like, there's two ways that I think about it, right? I think about what the need is and what my limit is. And the need is sort of, you need to have these discussions with people that don't necessarily have the same views as you, so that they challenge you as well, so that you can evolve and sort of strengthen your argument or see where you're failing. But the opposite is also true. Like Neil deGrasse Tyson has this fantastic idea that he put out, and I love it.
Can I mention him as the next possible leader? Neil deGrasse.
Earlier in this show, he did.
Maybe
our next leader.
I don't know if he necessarily has that. Yeah, I don't know if he necessarily has that desire, which might make him a good leader, right? He's not seeking it. It's sort of a need that's being filled.
You're going to help him to be a good leader. I'm going to help him. If you know of someone better, let me know. I think he's a good choice.
Maybe. I don't know. We have to see who else is out there.
He'll live in the web, not in isolation.
Yeah. Well, leaders should be using scientists to their advantage. Like, again, put a room full of scientists in with the leader that doesn't know science, and let the leader make a holistic or informed decision with all of the scientists' help, including...
Though. How does project management actually work? Where you repeat that thing you talked about earlier.
Oh, you're talking about me?
With project management.
You have multiple projects that you manage. I'm talking program management. You have multiple projects that are all doing their own thing, and they all might be doing good. I'm doing the best for my project. But if you put all the projects together, you have a holistic view of the enterprise needs or the nation's needs. And you say, well, this project might be doing really well, but it's not really helping the mission of what our goals are. So we have to steer that project back into line. And that's the same thing, But that's what a good leader would do, because I can't do ATA, Advanced Text Analytics, or toxicology, or talk biochemistry with Raju, but I can learn, hey, Raju, he knows this stuff pretty well, but you know what? I might meet 25 other Rajus out there, and 5 of them might be like, you know what? Raju, he's like a beginner, and we're all really good. But for the leader to understand which ones to actually pick from, that itself is valuable. Pick the leader, or pick the perfect discipline leads. Anyways, I can't talk straight, but
I see what you're saying.
What Mark's saying is we need to pick the next leader of our country with brains. No
Yeah.
longer, I'm pretty, I have more money. No, we need to pick someone who does what Mark just described.
Yeah, and that's
It's your country too. You may say you're from India. It's your country. We need 5 million more of you to come to this country.
I'm more of an American citizen than I am an Indian, so you know.
Exactly. But you know about project densities, right? America can handle 10 billion more people, right?
Maybe. I don't know. I think our infrastructure would start to collapse at some point. But no, I agree. I mean, yeah, we need to find people that sort of are educated but are willing but are able to speak to the people. And like one of the things that I learned just in the various places that I've been is that a fair number of people who are very well educated or very smart don't necessarily develop the ability to speak to those who are not necessarily on their intellectual level, because they figure, oh, I'm just going to find other people like me and I'm going to talk to them. And it's like, I spent half of my career trying to teach people way smarter than me how to talk to 10-year-olds, right? Because I'm like, if you can explain this to a 10-year-old, you can explain it to anybody. And scientists do a bad job of communicating with the average person because they're like, oh, you'll never get it. And the average person doesn't want to listen to scientists because they speak on a level that they can't fundamentally understand. And the reason that we end up with people who are electable, we look at an electability criteria, right? Electability essentially comes down to how well does this person communicate with the average person, right?
I'm here for a minute to go to Daniel, Daniel, how often does this happen in business? That we need to communicate all these economics things, just what he was talking about, and they don't get it. They're not the best. Does that make sense? Have you?
No, I guess I don't fully like when you say
economically, the person in charge is not the best person to understand the business. It's not the best person.
It happens a lot.
Yeah, I mean, it happens
Go with it, Mark.
Politically and in business and in companies, right? Like,
right.
I mean, but I guess I'm sorry, and I've had a couple of drinks, but I don't get what is it happens and it will happen forever, right? Like there's so it is just the nature of things, and I think that it's a noble thought to think that we can change that. But I don't think
we have to change it, or else guess what happens?
I get it. I just don't think that it can be.
I think you guys can do it. I think the millennials can do it. I think your brain sets, how your brains work, can do it.
Well, we should work around if the leader or a supervisor or somebody that doesn't quite.
Like you said, Mark, you're the leader.
But if I'm not in that position, maybe I'm a leader and I'm going to move forward in life and become a better leader. But if I have to talk to a leader that doesn't understand what I'm saying or doesn't get it, I have to try different angles, different ways of attacking that. Maybe get people on board, get a group of people to help that leader understand. And if the leader still doesn't understand, you have to really, I mean, because of the political position or the position in the hierarchy, you really have no choice but to try other avenues to convince them. I've been around long enough that every boss that I've had have, they're all great bosses for the most part. But I've always had to wait, why don't you get this? Why don't you get this? And I've had to just try various ways to.
I've been around long enough that the best thing to do was to put a bullet in their head. Sorry to say that.
Damn, that's pretty hard.
Yeah,
that's
don't
intense.
Yeah.
Do not prepare. They have short lives. They don't get it. Your brains of the millennials are the smartest in our history. Work towards a better future.
Hey, Paul, you should shut off the Facebook live feed while you're on Hangouts.
And guess what? Everyone here is from a foreign country.
Oh.
We have foreign countries. Foreign countries. You need to do this for the
Oh, thank goodness. And I was thinking we should just wear our regular boring clothes, right?
Oh my God.
What's happening?
This is all I have open. If I can't compete, I'll sign out.
Wait. What about your television? Is that on?
I will. Oh, yes. Just one.
There we go.
Better. Better. It's better.
So what was that again?
So bearded.
It is. It's one of the questions that I'm going to present to the millennials. I actually think your generation is the generation to fix these things because I look at other things to know that hopefully I'm correct. So your brain.
Steve, you old man.
Yes.
We learn from our mistakes.
Right.
We have fucked up.
Right. So they're seeing it. So hopefully they have the answer to the issue.
My goddaughter is 13. I brought her in to vote with me the last 2 times.
Did she vote?
She's 13. She's not a Democrat.
Nice one.
Hola, hijo.
Anyway,
Fíjate
I
que
pointed
acabamos
out
de
that
comer y pedí el súper,
she gets
llegó hace
like,
como 20 minutos.
it says pick one.
No sé si
There's one
estoy
choice.
lavando todo y desinfectando todo para guardarlo. Entonces él ya no me va a hacer fácil. También
We talked about
I'll be right back.
What's that?
I don't know who said what.
so
We
Paul,
laughed.
Daniel said he's going to be right back.
the virus up in your part of the woods. You're going to be affected up there in New Hampshire, northern New Hampshire.
I have cases in both cities nearby me. Well, one city, one town.
You're a candidate, right?
Diabetic, amputee, old.
Oh,
I could die.
are you going to come back and be cremated in Haverhill or what? What's your plans?
Do you have any money that we can have when you're dead?
He's
No, but I bought a quarter cow. And if I have to stay in my house, I'll have to live on steak and eggs.
Not bad. Not bad. Do you have enough alcohol?
So if the end comes, Paul,
I got 2 cases of Handle vodka.
actually, out of all the family, Paul's actually in one of the best positions. I've analyzed everyone's position. Paul lives far enough and deep enough. He's the one who's going to survive. We're all dead.
Fuck all of y'all.
Paul, I'm not going to drive to see you. I'm going to face it straight up.
Brother, you need eggs?
I'm not going to drive 2.5 hours for eggs yet. The day I drive for 2.5 hours for eggs, I'm moving in. I'm bringing my own tent.
Bring it. I got a camper, though.
Okay, good. Paul is far enough north so that you guys know that he's like nearly in Canada.
When shit hits the fan.
I mean, that affects his decisions less. He's gonna not be institutionalized, trust me. But at this heat,
So let me get this straight. Trudeau cures COVID-19.
I don't want to do no. There's no cure. It is what it is. It does what it does. Mark, you're gonna be like Daniel was saying. Washington D.C. is next. I guess. How could that affect that workload down there?
We're actually pretty lucky that our infrastructure is pretty well built for remote work, and a lot of people already do it.
Yeah.
Pretty much all the time. But don't get me wrong, there's plenty of restaurants and servers and whatnot. But I mean, we do try to take care of our own, I guess. But it's not going to affect the majority of white collar jobs at all, I don't think. There's not like production facilities here. It's all software development and things like that, government entities. I don't know. I think the hospital systems though are going to be overwhelmed.
Yeah, and it's many of them, but I do think that a large portion of white collar jobs, like a lot of people, accountants, do have to go, even if it's just for 1 hour in. I have to go into work every so often. I mean, I had to go in yesterday for 2 or 3 hours. Like, I mean, and that is the problem. The fact that you have still to go in complicates things. Like, it increases that tiny percentage of you getting it or giving it to someone else. I agree that in the US you have that infrastructure and it helps, but I don't think that we're completely there, man. And in Mexico, fuck, we're not ready for something like this, man. People cannot work remotely. So
No,
Right.
what's also bad is what Daniel mentions is the truth about government. They're going to lie about what happened. And that stinks for us smart people who obviously quickly see the lie. And it stinks that we don't have the power in the sense, and I don't mean power like this, we don't have the power to tell the truth, to change the future. It always happens. Where
This conversation, much like riding a motorcycle, even makes the beard smile.
so for what Danielle is going through, and I understand it from so many perspectives because I've been there, is ultimately this occurrence can occur and we don't have the correct knowledge of the outcome unless we, us little people, acknowledge the truth and then fix the outcome for the next election. Because look,
Steve,
yes,
do we need term limits
of
or
course,
real choices?
we can't, this form of government is not going to work for everybody. They can't work anymore. No matter what I put on it. It can't work. Not for intelligent people. And we got intelligent people around us, which is good.
Yeah, but not society.
Well,
Intelligent masses.
we don't have to worry about that. We have intelligent people, which is different from what they had in the 70s. We now have intelligent people. It's different.
Thanks for the compliments.
That
I'm only a millennial by, I guess, a year maybe. I was in 82.
Yes, but I can only tell you what, because I pay attention to a lot of things. We actually have more intelligent people on the earth today than the old political system. And it's time to use that intelligence
Yeah.
to the best of our ability. Because I'm going to tell you what, there's still going to be wormholes. There's still going to be black holes to use it to try to, in a positive way, save the earth. Because guess what? We could be gone tomorrow. But you need
Just
to,
imagine me in public.
you can't have someone pulling his dick out and saying, I have the biggest dick, I'm the boss. Hey, yeah, that doesn't work. We need to cancel old paradigms. We need smart people. Everywhere.
Does Paul get Canadian beer readily available where he's at?
Probably.
Trying to get Labatt? What do you want, Molson?
No, like I was just curious, like how.
Right.
You say,
How do you feel? Because you're definitely, you were born in were you born in a other country?
Yeah, I was born in India.
How old were you when you left that country?
I was 5.
So 5, okay. I gotta say that you may not have known the atonement at 5.
Oh no, I was pretty Indian when I moved here, and I used to go back every 3 years when I was a kid. Like,
What does India ask of you, of your intelligence to change? What does India ask of you personally to fix in this country?
I'm confused. Like, can you say that again? You broke up a little bit.
It's not a specific talk. I knew. Can you hear that one? When I was 8 years old, I woke up. I didn't wake up at 5. My brain woke up at 5. My brain at 13 was way smarter than every parent that I ever talked to. So you fall into a specific category. You have a country of origin that is the most populous in the world. So what does your country ask you to do for the universe? Not for the country, but for everything.
Oh, well, India is a country that is full of Hindus and Buddhists and all these people, right? We're always asked to sort of think about the greater good than the individual, but it's sort of, how do you find that sort of line between that and a capitalist culture, right? So sometimes those ideals are lost. But I mean, I grew up. My dad's a scientist, right? My mom is also to a degree a scientist, but
nuclear scientist too.
Huh?
Nuclear. Your dad.
That's what he was, yeah. And so it's sort of like, I've always been told to sort of, and my parents are they're very philanthropic, and they do a lot for their community and stuff. And my family has always raised me and my sister to sort of try and do the best that we can with the abilities that we have for the world rather than for ourselves, right? I mean, like, you can chase money and glory all you want, but in the end, like, leave whatever you do or wherever you are a little bit better than how you found it. And that's just because that's the way that I've been raised. And I think that that's a little bit more useful, because you can chase money all you want, you can chase fame all you want, but making today a little bit better than yesterday is something I can actively do. It's, the whole set small goals for yourself thing. This is a small goal that I can achieve every day. And I don't know if that's a cultural thing. I don't know if that's a cultural thing because of the way I was raised by my parents. Therefore, it's, culturally influenced by their own culture kind of thing. But I don't know if that's what India asks of me, but that's what my parents have asked of me. And that's what I sort of ask of myself every day.
What you're saying is the same thing that in America, we're asked of the same thing. But the weird peculiarity to this is you actually have more billions of possibilities on your shoulder, unless you're from Bangladesh, and they have even more billions.
Don't open those fingers, Steve.
To save. So
That would be a racist signal.
I don't want to be racist. You yourself, personally, because I want to, actually, not for nothing, you may be my next president of the world, in a sense. Because you have more in the grit than I have. I only have 360 million people. So if I lose them, it's nothing. It's on the perfect human time, you have 1.2 billion.
So this is the interesting thing that, like, we need to really think about. Huh?
Do you really like them? They're crazy, right?
Like who?
Like people. Like, I like people. I love people. I mean,
I used to.
I joke about this a lot.
Because you've never liked somebody.
I think I like people, but I always know that they'll find a way to disappoint me eventually. But that's not always true for everybody. But I think that one of the things to really think about is that, we live in a society now that is, as much as people want to fight it, we're global. We're a global society, right? It's kind of, cultures move fluidly back and forth. And as much as people want to think that their culture is their culture and is not influenced by anything else and will never be influenced by anything else, they're wrong. Right? We, especially in America, but all over the world, every culture takes the best and sometimes the worst of other cultures and sort of takes it on, because from a evolutionary perspective, that's what we've been engineered to do, right? You see something that's happening that's different and might be better, and you sort of absorb it, whether that be cultural or sort of some sort of tool, right? So
we live in a global society with a village mentality.
Yeah, that's true.
Right.
We fight for the village.
It's the bad part.
Yeah, the village is the bad part, right? It's sort of like you think that your boundaries are set, but they're not necessarily set. And the interesting thing is that, like, the idea that somebody from X country or Y country, like if we were to sort of move to a president of the world sort of thing, it would be country based, is probably true, but unfortunate, right? We need people who transcend those sort of boundaries, because there's commonalities between everybody, and there's common needs for everybody, and we all have a shared experience. And speaking up, like holding up solid boundaries back in like the 1800s made sense, maybe 1700s, maybe 1000 probably made sense to hold up like country boundaries, right? But now we can't really do that. Everything's fluid, everything moves. But I do have to hop off though.
Mark, we visited Colombia, right, Mark?
I'll talk to you guys later. This is fun.
See you, Roger.
Mark, you visited Colombia. You made sure your speech, it was Americanized as you going to Colombia to hear. And I can understand that, because I've been to a lot of countries, and we kind of Americanized
You can
our
still play a little bit,
visitations.
okay? But
Are you
soon.
there, Mark?
Yeah, I'm here.
Did you hear that, or was I?
You were talking about Colombia and something about being Americanized.
There's a lot of static.
Wait, I can get a Columbia connection.
Sorry, guys. I thought I had muted my microphone, and obviously I was talking to my kid. I apologize. I thought I had.
We
muted
didn't,
They're digital.
we didn't hear you.
Sorry.
Yes, you know what we should do is probably maybe the vibes are getting like close this mark and re-invite everybody.